Good morning, everyone. My name is Luke Tannen, and I'm the Executive Director of Chicago Innovation, an organization that educates, connects, and celebrates local innovative companies cutting across all industries, big companies and small, for-profits and nonprofits, through a series of year-round events and programs. And we're also a very proud partner and customer of Wintrust, like many of you in the audience. On behalf of Wintrust, I'd like to welcome you all to today's event, Virtual Storytelling, when your story goes off script. We have some great storytelling experts who will lead today's discussion. Now, before we meet them, I'd like to let everyone know that if you have a question during the presentation, you can send it to us via the Zoom Q&A while the event is taking place, so our speakers can see what is on your mind and they will try to respond to it at the end. Now, I'd like to hand the Zoom mic over to Erin Siegel. She's the Senior Vice President of Nonprofit and Healthcare Banking at Wintrust, who will be kicking off today's presentation. Erin has been with Wintrust since 2013 and in commercial banking for almost 15 years. She serves as a relationship manager on the team as the main point of contact for all credit needs, managing over $260 million in loans for clients in the private education, social service, cultural, religious, and healthcare industries. Erin is also very involved in the community. She volunteers her time across the nonprofit sector and previously served on the board of Women in Public Finance. And she's currently representing Wintrust on the board of directors at Coles Children's Museum as well. So please give a warm Zoom virtual event welcome to Erin Siegel.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Luke. We appreciate the existing partnership with Chicago Innovation. Your team has really helped us launch several successful virtual events over the last several months. And actually, Chicago Innovation is hosting their own virtual event on March 23rd, focused on the future of sports with our very own CEO, Ed Waymer. So feel free to tune into that as well. Our Wintrust nonprofit group is dedicated to providing ongoing valuable educational seminars outside of traditional banking to our network. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce our guest speakers today, who will be focused on virtual events and how the art of storytelling can increase donor engagement. Stephanie Pessis-Weil is the Chief Empowerment Officer at Empowered Nonprofits. Stephanie has over 23 years of experience in the nonprofit space, specializing in a consulting capacity to help her clients create fundraising initiatives, execute virtual events, and recruit and engage effective leadership. Kelly Leonard is the Executive Director of Learning and Applied Improvisation at Second City. Kelly oversaw Second City's live theatrical division for over 20 years. He's also a well-known author, podcast, and radio host with direct expertise on speaking to how the power of improvisation changes lives. Thank you for your time today. And we're thrilled that you're able to join us for this thought-provoking topic that will hopefully help drive future success in your fundraising initiatives. Now I'll hand it off to Stephanie to kick it off.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Kelly and I are so excited to be here. I am going to be screen sharing a few things here and there. So please bear with me as I am switching back and forth. Kelly and I have about an hour and 15-minute long presentation, and then we are going to take some questions at the end. But right now I am going to screen share with you so that we can get started. So just bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So Kelly and I, as Erin just introduced us, I am from Empowered Nonprofits and I am the Chief Empowerment Officer. And Kelly is the Executive Director of Second City. And we are going to be doing virtual storytelling when your story goes off script. So this year has been a real challenging year for all of us on many levels, and especially in the nonprofit fields. We have had to really pivot. That word has been so overused at this point, but it's a really good word. And what really hasn't changed is that we all have a story to tell. Every nonprofit has an important mission, and we can convey that in a variety of ways. So today we're going to help you understand how important storytelling is to raise essential dollars for your mission and to elevate the profile of your organization. And it's really important. Storytelling is really essential in how we're connecting donors with our mission. We need to inspire them. And it's really a way for you to illustrate how they can have an impact on your organization. Today, we're going to focus on 4 really important things: storytelling, the importance of connection, co-creation, and resilience. So basically, what I'm going to do now is before we really hop in, I am going to share a 4-minute long story with you. It is a story from a client that I recently worked with called the North Lawndale Employment Network. This is a story of Bernita. And a wonderful production company called P3 put this together. So I do want to give them credit. But we use this video as a way of telling the story of the organization. And I thought it would be a really wonderful way to start off today. So give me a second while I switch over to this piece and we will get going. Hold on, here we go.
We got food, lunchables, and clothes. We got a pillow. Anybody want a pillow? Who said that? I can't see you, babe. Oh, here.
If I can just let someone know that there's help out there, whether it's small or big to others, that is part of my purpose in life.
Okay, we're leaving. We got the food and the clothes. God bless you all.
I may not be a millionaire, but my lived experiences can help a lot of people. I made some bad decisions and got involved in criminal activity. So I eventually was sentenced to 4 years. Correctional facilities tear away every piece of dignity you thought you had. Because when I left, they always say, well, see you next time. No, you will not see me next time. When my parole officer told me about U-turn permitted, I said, okay, let me just go. It's my way to get outside because I was still on the van and in the house.
First time I met Bernita, I can remember her coming through the doors at U-turn permitted. She demonstrated that servant leadership style early on, and I became really impressed, with her consistency.
Jose began to talk about how you cannot let others' opinion of you stop you or slow you down. That was just amazing to me. Like, these are real people and they're treating us like real people. It changed my life completely. When I graduated, my coach recommended me for a position with the Ready Chicago program.
Ready works with highest risk individuals in North Lawndale who are shooters or in jeopardy of being shot. We're offering cognitive behavioral therapy along with employment opportunities for them.
There you go. Oh, I got 2 new job leads for my kids. Wow, a plant manager.
I get to advocate to different employers why they should hire my clients after their 18 months with Ready. The fact that I walked in the door day 1 with the electronic monitoring band on my leg kind of relaxed the guys. They're like, okay, she's not hiding. That is what NLEN instilled in me. Let them see all your wounds and scars, but bring the spotlight onto what you're doing now to better yourself and help them.
She turns into a mother figure, greeting the participants in the morning, uplifting them. This job is more than a job to her. So I believe that connection of a person who really cares goes a long way with the participants.
The first day I was with Ready, it was Miss Bernita. Now it's Mama B. It's nothing I wouldn't do for them. Nothing. I'm sorry.
She is consistent with whatever it is that she says she's going to do. And if she can't do it, she's going to go to extremely great lengths to try to find resources to help participants out.
She gets her drive from being incarcerated and then seeing how it feels to want somebody else to help you. I believe that was her main focus and goal, is to pay it forward.
I'm honored to accept the award. I'm proud of the work that I've done, and I'm proud of the relationships that I've developed since I've been with them. And for them to recognize me for that, that's not why I do it. It's not, but I thank them. I do.
So I just love that video. I think it's just such an important, it's just so beautiful in so many ways. And I think that, the piece for me that really strikes me is, that we're focused on one person and we're able to kind of follow her through, and we have people speaking about her. There's a lot of elements of this story that I'm going to expand on in a little bit. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand the floor over to Kelly, and he is going to talk about storytelling. And then once he's done, I will come back to it and share some pointers that I have on the use of video during storytelling, and also some other ways and avenues that you can tell stories when you are talking about your organization. So Kelly, I'm going to hand it over to you right now.
Great. So let's start with a story. Might as well, this is what we're doing. So it's about 13 years ago, and I'm here in my office at the Second City, and it's a Friday. And it's the end of the day, around 5 o'clock, and I'm getting my stuff together. And my son, Nick, is upstairs, and he's finishing his first week of improv classes at the Second City. And here's what you need to know about Nick at the time. He was 10 years old. He was chubby. He has weird theater parents, so he's kind of like a weird theater kid, and he gets bullied at school. But this week is great. He's having a great time, and comes down, hops in the car. We're driving out of Piper's Alley, and he says, "Dad, you know what I love about improv class?" I go, "No, buddy. What do you love about improv class?" He says, "In improv, if you're nice, if you're funny, you're popular." And I just think to myself, that's actually the world I would like to live in. So I started at the Second City in 1988. It was my first gig out of college. I was a dishwasher. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. The back bar in those days at the Second City was filled with alcoholics and sociopaths, and I'm not actually making that up. You could also smoke in the theater. This is 1988. So just imagine people packed in, terrible. And I don't know if you know how Second City is set up, but we do two acts of scripted content, and then a third act that is improvised, where the actors are making it up. And the cast in those days, I mean, Bonnie Hunt and Mike Myers were on the main stage. Jane Lynch was in. Chris Farley had just been hired in the touring company and was constantly getting in trouble for breaking stuff. And when I'd come around to these improv sets, it felt like absolute magic. But you work here a little while and you learn it's not magic at all. So I'm not going to bury the lead. Improvisation is yoga for your social skills. Improvisation is
loud group mindfulness. Improvisation is a practice in being unpracticed, which is how we walk through the world every day. Thanks for the note on my mic. I just fixed it. So if you're hearing that and it surprises you, it might not if you knew the origin story of the Second City. Actually, the improv games that everyone learns when they get hired in the Second City were developed by a social worker in the 1920s by the name of Viola Spolin. And she was working at Jane Addams' Hull House. And her job was to better assimilate the immigrant children who were coming into her care. So she developed all these games so the kids could come together and empathize and communicate. A lot of the games are in gibberish or silence because the kids didn't always share the same language. And her son, Paul Sills, who was studying at the University of Chicago, loved these games. So he taught them to his friends, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, among others, and they formed the first improvisational theater in America called the Compass Players in 1957. And that turns into the Second City in 1959. So Stephanie, the story I just told, which is a part of a TEDx talk I gave, I think illustrates three elements that I think are important to storytelling. Using specifics. Talk about dates and times and seasons and those sorts of things. It's really, really important. We know this in improvisation and comedy specifically. Personal, make it personal. Add yourself and your story. That's what people are interested. They are truly interested in the human being that you are. And then the third is make it either inspirational or aspirational. Don't be afraid to make big, gaudy statements about what you believe in. I was actually doing a keynote for Google 2 weeks ago about storytelling. And one of the things we talked about effective storytelling is that it starts with the storyteller. And the storyteller has to have an honest understanding of themselves. You don't really need charisma. What you need is conviction. If you believe in what you're saying, it doesn't matter if you're like the greatest orator of all time. If you look at some of the top TED Talks, like Ken Robinson's TED Talk, it's not like he's this great speaker. He believes what he's saying, and we lock in. So specifically around comedic storytelling, which is a thing that I have an expertise in. I have a friend named Katie Borum-Chetu. She's a professor at American University in the Center for Media and Social Impact. And she talks about 5 different ways that comedy is highly effective in communicating messages. And I think you might find this interesting. One is that comedy attracts attention and cuts through the noise. And it doesn't have to be uproarious comedy. This is just the use even of sort of gentle humor, cutting through the noise, crucial, especially right now. Number 2 is that comedy is a tool of persuasion because it speaks to us emotionally. Part of the reason human beings love stories is we're emotional creatures. So if you can tug on the sort of emotional strings, which is why I talk about my son being bullied, that's something that a lot of people, if they didn't experience it themselves, they saw it or they have family members. It's a real thing, and we can sort of latch into that. Comedy also, number 3, makes complex social issues more accessible. And so the way I illustrate this, and I talk about this in my book, Yes And, is we were hired by the Department of Education under Obama to come do this event. And what they needed to do is have 3 different groups actually talk to each other. And these groups were school board presidents, school superintendents, and teacher union leaders. They don't like each other, those groups, generally speaking. And so we were trying to figure out the way to sort of unite them and get them sort of on the same level for this conference. And what we actually ended up realizing is, well, we couldn't find one thing that united them, but we could find one thing that they all detested, and that's Finland. In particular, the way that Finnish educators are lauded all over the world of having like the greatest educational system. This is something just widely, it's always brought up as an example, and all these groups just like are tired of hearing about the Finns. So what we actually did was, people didn't know Second City was going to be there. We announced at the beginning of this conference that 3 Finnish education experts were going to be speaking, and people were not excited about this. But then our actors come out, and they've got like blue hair, outrageous costumes. They start speaking in these outlandish, accents, and people went nuts. And then we sort of got into our message, and we loosened up the crowd. We got them sort of united and through laughter, which is a really huge thing, and actually kicked off the conference really well. And it was a very successful conference. Comedy, number 4, breaks down social barriers. It's a really, really effective tool for that. And finally, comedy is highly shareable. And this is true of all stories. And Stephanie, before I hand it off to you, I do want to tell one more story. So I host the podcast Getting to Yes And for Second City and WGN Radio. And one of the most listened to recent episodes was with a guy who I had never heard of when the pitch came in. And his name is Sanford Greenberg. He is a very rich man who's a philanthropist. And his story was just amazing. And it's a perfect illustration of how, when you can really tell a human being's story, you can latch in. So I'm just going to tell you quickly about Sanford. So he is the son of Holocaust survivors who escaped Germany and came to Buffalo with no money. And this is in the late 40s, early 50s. And his dad dies when he's 5. So he and his 2 siblings are with their mom, who had something like $19 to her name. She actually went to a service, Jewish services, to see if they could help her. And they said they'd only help her by splitting up the kids. And she wouldn't do it. She actually ends up marrying their uncle, who owns a junk shop. And so that's a slightly step up. So Sanford grows up. And turns out he's like good looking. He's great at sports. He's a scholar. And he does so well, he gets a scholarship to Columbia University in 1959. And so he goes there, and like the first week, he meets this guy, Arthur, who's studying architecture, and they become best friends and roommates. Around his sophomore year, he starts to develop these eye problems, and he goes back to his doctor in Buffalo, who prescribes these drops, but it's not getting better, it's getting worse. But the doctor just says, keep doing the drops. Junior year, he goes completely blind. He can't see anything. He has surgery. Apparently the drops were actually making his condition worse. And he has this operation and he's blind. And he goes home and Arthur comes to visit. And he's like, you know, look, come back to school. We'll figure out how to make this work. And he in no way was thinking he'd ever go back to school. And you have to remember, in those days, a blind person really didn't have many options. I think they could be like a small town judge or make cane back chairs were the two things that the options that he felt were open to him or were presented to him legitimately. But Arthur persists and really pushes him. And finally, he's like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so he goes back to school. Arthur reads his lessons to him. Sanford actually starts taking around a tape recorder, one of those giant reel-to-reels, so he can audio tape the lectures. He actually recognizes that it takes too long to re-listen to those, so he finds a way to compress the audio, and so he can listen more quickly. And there's one day where he's going into the city to see his social worker, and Arthur takes him. And then after the event, he's like, all right, I need to get back to class. And Arthur says, oh, I can't take you back. I have to go draw this building downtown. So why don't you stay with me? He's like, no, I really need to get back. And Arthur's like, I just can't take you back. He's like, okay, I'm going to do it myself. He has no cane. And if you look at Sanford, the way his eyes look, you don't know he's blind. He has no cane. He doesn't want to carry one. He negotiates this way back into the subway. He falls downstairs. He runs into people. Someone sort of saves him from going onto the tracks. He is bloody and bruised by the time he gets to the campus. And he's walking on campus and he hears a voice behind him say, hey, buddy. And it's Arthur, and he's been there all along. And while Sanford was furious, what Arthur was really doing was teaching him that he can do it. He can make it himself. The cool thing about this is that guy Arthur didn't end up going into architecture. He went into music, and it was Art Garfunkel who became Stanford's lifelong friend. Isn't this story amazing? It's like, it was something I couldn't believe. And one of the things I loved about talking to Sanford, and he said that people without sight have a special reverence for trust because they have to. And I asked him, I go, well, have people let you down, you know, when you've given them trust? He said, maybe twice, 3 times. I'm like, that's a good batting average. So Stephanie, I'll hand it over to you, but I think these, as you're seeing, right, these stories, whether it's my story or Sanford's story, you know, combine all the elements, talk about the challenges and use the details, because it's going to help you connect to your the person you're trying to connect to.
Thank you, Kelly. Oh my goodness, I have the chills right now. That was such a crazy good story. Not what I was expecting at all. So I guess the element of surprise is also really important as well. Okay, so I'm going to reshare my screen right now so we can talk about the importance of storytelling. So here we go. You know, there's a lot of ways that we can tell our stories. You know, one of the ways that Kelly just illustrated was just by, you know, face-to-face telling the story and sharing that with a group of people. You know, we often see other avenues, such as a case for support, when you're sitting down and you're writing, you know, the impact that dollars will have for the mission of your organization. Oftentimes we incorporate a story into that case, or maybe a couple of stories, to illustrate the impact that those dollars might have on somebody in your organization. We can tell stories through pictures. You know, throughout this presentation, you know, Kelly and I have shared pictures. Sometimes just a visual is a beautiful way to pull people in to your mission. Videos, as you just saw, through Bernita's story. A lot of us are using virtual events right now, and we're incorporating video stories. We're using it through videos on social media as well. And those might be shorter, 10-second, 30-second, 1 minute long videos. We're verbally telling our stories, such as Kelly just did, through we can tell them in-person events or on Zoom meetings. Also through our website, having visuals, utilizing video, a variety of different avenues on our website can be used to tell your story. So make sure that you're doing that and you're not just providing information and facts. And then of course, social media, one of the most commonly used ways of telling stories right now. People post words up there. They're using pictures, they're using videos. These are all really important avenues for us to be able to share the importance of our mission. Okay. So here we go. When we're talking about the use of video in the age of COVID-19, because that's really a huge area that we're seeing nonprofits go right now, and that we're helping nonprofits go right now. A couple of questions that we want you to ask yourself before you are embarking on your storytelling. So who's your audience? Who are you directing this to? Are you directing this to a donor base of support? Are you, is it, the individuals that you might want to be recruiting for your services? So make sure you understand who your audience is before you embark on this effort. What message would best resonate with that audience? For North Lawndale, they decided to tell a story of somebody that was really truly impacted by the program, a success story, and the message is that your dollars can really help impact even more people. You also want to connect with the head and the heart. Some people are fact people. Some people want to know exactly how their dollars are having impact. So they want to know the numbers. They want to know how many people are in the program, how many dollars have been raised throughout the year. And some people are really heart people. Kelly just referred to this, when you're telling a story, pulling at those heartstrings. A lot of people are heart people, and they want to, in order to feel more connected, they need to feel that sense of emotion. But make sure you're providing two avenues for that, because your audience is going to see things from a different way. We recommend that you feature 1 to 2 strong main characters throughout your video, because if you add too much in, it can get very distracting. If you can really go deeper and describe the story and with more breadth, often your audience will be able to connect with that person on a much deeper level. When you are filming, let your speakers talk. The beauty of video is that you can always edit things out. So we want this to be natural. We want it to be organic. So make sure that you provide questions to them, maybe even ahead of time for them to think about, so that you get them on a topic that you would like to highlight within your video, but make sure that you don't guide them too much, once again, for that organic nature of the video. Also, make sure that you don't just have talking heads. Oftentimes we'll see a lot of videos just with one person talking. As you saw with Bernita, sometimes we were interviewing people sitting in chairs. Sometimes we were using B-roll or powerful photographs to tell the story. So make sure that you're really using a variety of different media avenues throughout the video to keep people engaged. Sorry about that. Also, longer isn't always better. And it also depends on what you're filming. So if you are showing a video at a gala, 5 minutes might be completely appropriate for that, but somebody's probably not going to watch a 5-minute video on social media. So you might want to take whatever content that you have and boil it down to maybe 30 seconds and use that to tease an event or to just highlight the program that you're conveying in a very short period of time. And always incorporate some sort of compelling call to action throughout your video or at the end of it. You know, how can they connect with you? How can they get involved? How can they donate? You know, is there a program that you're launching? So just ensure that there's something in that video that is saying, okay, we just showed you this, you just connected with us. Now how can you partner with us? So now I'm going to hand it back over to Kelly. He's going to talk about connection, and I will be back in a couple of minutes. Kelly, would you like me to take off this screen so we can just see you speaking?
Sure.
Okay, great.
That is more connectable, I think. So,
yeah, exactly.
So in 2015, I had this midlife crisis, and I stepped down from running the second city with no plan. And I had little kids at the time. It's not a great move. But our owner had pity on me, and he said, well, I'll pay you as a consultant for a year, and you can build a bridge back in or build a bridge out. And I had just come off book tour. And any author who tells you they don't do this, they're lying. So in the days when you could go on book tour, when you go to different cities, I always went to the bookstore, the local bookstore, to see if my book was on their shelf. And since I had written this business book, Yes And, about how we take improv into the corporate world, I was looking at the business books. And I was seeing all these books on the art of negotiation. And all of them talked about improv. They all mentioned how having an improv mindset is good, but they didn't go deeper. So when I came back to Chicago and I didn't really have a job, I was talking to Steve Johnston, who is running Second City Works, the B2B arm of Second City. And he's like, well, you got any ideas for our division? And I said, yeah, what if I found an academic in Chicago who was an expert in the art of negotiation, and we built out a workshop and we could sell that to people? And he's like, great idea. So I go to my office and I Google academic Chicago negotiation. The first 5 academics that come up, I don't know who they are, but I email all of them and say, would you be interested in meeting? So 4 of them get back to me right away. I'm in Starbucks like 2 days later with the head of negotiation department at Loyola. So people are very into the idea. About a week later, I get the guy from the University of Chicago who emails me, and he's like, hey, sorry it took so long. Do you still want to meet? So like old Kelly never would have taken this meeting because I already had like a deal in hand. But you know, I'm in the sort of Shonda Rhimes Year of Yes stuff. And I'm like, okay, let's meet. So Eugene Caruso at the University of Chicago says, great, come down to the Hyde Park, to the campus. I'm gonna invite my wife, Heather, because she also teaches here and I think she'd be interested. So I go in the office and I'm sort of presenting my theories on improvisation. Eugene could care less, he's checking email, but Heather is like locked in. And when I finished talking about improv, she's like, Kelly, we're behavioral scientists. We have decades of research that show us that people make bad decisions for themselves. What you're talking about is an art form and a practice where they could learn to make better decisions for themselves. Those two worlds have never been put together. So within like a month, we announced the formation of the Second Science Project. And this is an initiative that I've co-led with Heather for the last 5 years, which looks at behavioral science through the lens of improvisation and vice versa. So this is all evidence-based, it's all scientific work. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is how human beings crave connection. And when we were first, in our very first session with the scholars, so a bunch of different scholars would come in and collaborate, we had weekly labs. They were like, show us an improv exercise, like one of your most famous ones. So we did Yes And. And when we do the Yes And exercise, we pair up 2 people, and person A is instructed to pitch to person B for like a minute, a reunion party of today. And the job of person B is to say no in as many ways as possible to every initiative. We all know how this feels. We've all been in this meeting. But the experience of having it happen to you, this is why improvisation is a pedagogy. You learn by doing. So they do that. Then we have them reverse, and the other person pitches. And person A, then their job is to say yes, but to every initiative. Now, for some people, that feels better. For some people, it feels worse. What we say is like, yes, but is basically no with a top hat. You're actually getting the notion of it just sounds nicer. And then the third is where everyone yes ands every idea. And at that point, you're having sushi on the moon. This is the whole idea about Yes And is to build and grow and transform ideas. And it's how we get to our best material on stage. And frankly, it's how innovation works, is in a yes and mindset. The scholars were like, this is great. We have tons of evidence about gratitude and other stuff that we can bring to you to show why yes and is a sort of scientifically valid theory. Then they asked the question, though, what happens when you have an intractable problem where you just completely disagree with someone? We didn't know what they didn't know. And so we kind of went back and they did some research and we did some improv practice and conversation. And by coming together, we figured out this sort of fourth pillar of improvisation, which is thank you because. And the idea here is if you are having a conversation with someone that you disagree with fundamentally on what they're saying, the way you stay in that conversation is first thanking them when they share their position that you don't agree with, because that does set off the gratitude part of the brain. And then the because is crucial. You have to find something, some element of what they're saying that you do agree with. So the example I often use with this is in talking to someone who's anti-vaccine. I am not anti-vaccine, adamantly so. But if I need to stay in that conversation, I would, maybe the thing I find with them is like, look, thank you for sharing that information because I know that you care for your child so much. You don't want to hurt them by giving them the vaccine. I feel the same way. I don't want to hurt my child by not giving them the vaccine. So the important thing is that we agree on that one point. We have run this study thousands of times. There's a paper coming out next year about it, and it's overwhelming how much longer people stay in these conversations and then also feel that they can get somewhere with their partner, even though they have this fundamental disagreement. Interestingly, we also ran it where only one person did the thank you because, the other person did it, and it was still more successful than just the arguing that normally happens. I think this is important in terms of understanding how we need to connect. And I really do think it comes down to gratitude. I interviewed Adrian Gotzik and Chester Elton. They wrote this book called Leading with Gratitude. And they say there is a staggering gratitude deficit in the work world. So if we can enter conversations where we replace blame with curiosity, so that our first sort of moment when we walk into these conversations is to be curious, we're going to be able to get over these sort of stumbling blocks. In improvisation, we say you need to see all obstacles as gifts. And when you do that, you can find connections sometimes in even some of the strangest places. Stephanie, I'll pass it back to you.
Kelly, I couldn't have asked you to set up my next section more perfectly.
Perfect.
So here we go. This was Kelly's thank you and yes and thank you because section. And I am going to focus on creating connections. We really want to ensure that, that our donor base of support, that our board members who are donors, by the way, we have to see them as that as well, that we are thanking them and showing gratitude, and that we're connecting with them in many different ways, even in light of the pandemic, really taking into consideration how are we connecting with our donor base of support, with our constituents. So number one is, I think it's really important that our staff and our board always see themselves as ambassadors, that they are championing the work of their organization and that they are consistently out there representing the mission. So whether they're at a meeting or whether they're at an event that is related to your organization, or whether they're out there in public, we always want them to somehow have that organization hat on, so that they're considering their interactions with other people in that light. And, sometimes I forget, I've had some of those experiences in the craziest of ways where I see someone in the grocery store and we end up talking, and somehow I find out that they're on a board or that their organization needs help. And I give them some advice or some information. So I always really have my Empowered Nonprofits hat on, so that I am able to help organizations or convey a story or information that might be useful. And the most important thing is that an ambassador should be a good storyteller. They need to really understand how they are playing that role. So something that we really like to do with board members and staff members when we are working with them is helping them create their elevator pitch. What's that, 30-second, 1-minute pitch that they have if they run into somebody who all of a sudden that conversation turns into, hey, we have this connection here regarding this mission. Let me tell you about this organization that I'm involved with. So when we're helping somebody create an elevator pitch, we often ask them to sit down and to really think about what are some words, one words that really describe our organization. Is it empowering? Is it leadership? Is it education? Is it inspiring? So write down some of those really beautiful words that you can think of regarding your organization. What are some ways that that organization is enhancing lives, impacting lives? Maybe there's 2 or 3 things that you can write down regarding that impact. And what does the organization mean to you? What does it personally mean to you? Why are you personally involved in that organization? And finally, can you identify a story that you have had or that you have heard somebody else tell that can really highlight the organization and help that person connect with your mission? So the whole goal of this process is to give them an organized thought process and to help them really be able to convey the importance of your mission to the outside world while conveying your vision and your passion for that organization. And don't forget, one of the most important things that we can do is practice. So oftentimes what we do is during a board meeting, we will have 2 board members get together and practice their elevator pitches on another board member or on another staff member, so that when they are out there, they can really be well-versed in telling that story. Even in COVID, it is essential that you are connecting with your donors and that you are telling your story well. Throughout the course of the year, it is really essential that you are having touch points with your donor base of support, whether that's a phone call, whether it's through social media, whether it's through a newsletter, whether it's you bring your donors together for a Zoom call and you have a really important speaker that comes and talks about something related to your mission. We want to ensure that our donor base of support is feeling connected to you. It's very easy right now, especially in COVID, to say, oh my goodness, we don't know what to do. But if you could really sit down and make sure that you have a plan to help your donors feel their value, even if it's virtual, it is just completely important that you do not lose that personal connection and interaction. If they can't come in now to your facility to do a tour, can you do a virtual tour? Can you take a video camera and walk around your facility? Can you have 1 or 2 people there that can tell the story or say thank you to the donor base of support for the dollars that they're providing? So, just make sure that either whether it's through letters or handwritten notes or Zooms or just in a variety of very different ways that we're seeing out there right now through virtual events, please make sure that you are continuing to build that essential rapport with your donor base of support. Okay, now we're going to go on to co-creation.
I got to build for you first, though, Steph.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
So you just made me think about something, and this might be a tip people will be interested in. There's an improv exercise called 60-30-10. And what we do is have you tell your story in 60 seconds, then you tell your story in 30 seconds, and then you tell your story in 10 seconds. And this is a great way to practice this. And it was very interesting because an instructor, Mark Sutton, was leading a corporate workshop, and a woman from the workshop was like, "Oh my God, you're describing what it means to go into the White House and you have to go to the Oval Office to talk to the president." And this was Ash Carter's wife, so the former Secretary of Defense. And she said when Ash had to go in and talk to Obama, he needed to have his 60 version, his 30-second version, and his 10-second version, depending on how busy the president was. I actually interviewed him in the podcast, and he confirmed this. So it's something. It's a really simple technique that you can use to practice, and people don't practice enough of any of this stuff. And I always talk about this, like peak performers in any field, whether you're an artist or a sports person, whatever, they're constantly working on their skills. And yet, for people who are in sales or other stuff, millions of dollars could be on the line, and like no one is practicing. So give yourself a break and actually practice this stuff.
Exactly. And Kelly and I were even talking about this, beforehand. Like, you're probably going to feel nervous,
Yes.
and that's normal. Like Kelly and I were talking about before we were even coming on. I've been doing this for 23 years now. Kelly's been doing this for,
longer
years as well. And, both of us came onto this call, onto this meeting nervous today. And, I even probably stumbled a little bit in the beginning because of my nerves. So the more you can go in and be prepared and practice, you may still have that nervous stomach. You may still have that butterfly, feeling, but you're going to be more prepared for whatever might come about in that conversation. So excellent point, Kelly. Okay, so now we are going to move on to co-creation. I'm going to actually just share the definition of co-creation with you. And then we are going to, and then Kelly is going to jump in with a little more information on that. So hold on, I have to figure out how to move all this. I don't know if you guys can all see it, but I can right now. Okay, so co-creation is a form of collaboration, and it's also it's an extremely innovative process. The point of it is to bring together a group of individuals that will have a goal of really tackling something and finding ways to improve that topic together. Instead of keeping those ideas to yourself or just working on that idea individually, some of the most beautiful ideas come from working together in a group, brainstorming, and really bringing that process together. And it's also really important to bring people together that have different points of views as well. So somebody who really may not think with their head might be really great in a group with somebody who really will think with their heart, so that you can bring both of those perspectives to that co-creation process. So we really think that outside input out of your comfort group is really essential to this process. And what you will find is that you can come up with unexpected ideas and a really beautiful opportunity to interact with your constituents in a way that is unbelievably more meaningful. And that we have also found during this time of COVID, that, if you are up to it and you're willing to really challenge yourself to think outside of the box, which is something I'll talk about a little bit later, that really we're seeing organizations do really incredible things. So I am now going to pass it back over to Kelly.
Thanks. So Second City, of course, has been crowdsourcing and rapid prototyping since 1959. They just didn't call it those things. We take suggestions from the audience to create our material. We adjust on the fly based on whether they're laughing or not laughing, more importantly. The Simpsons, actually, we were lampooned. They had an episode where Homer came to Chicago, and he comes to Second City and he's shouting out suggestions, and he's wondering why he isn't getting paid because he's co-writing the show. Always an honor to be lampooned by the Simpsons. I just interviewed Sunil Gupta for the podcast. It hasn't aired yet. It's going to be up in like 4 or 5 weeks. He's the CEO of Rise, the health app, and he has this incredible book. It is one of the best business books I've read of recent vintage, which is called Backable. And he starts the book by talking about how when he first went out for funding for Rise, he failed miserably. And he actually got invited to speak at a failure conference that was then written up in the New York Times under like massive failures, and it's his picture. So that's where this book starts. And then he tells the story about this woman. It was a woman who lives in the border town. She's a refugee. This is in border town, Pakistan and India. And she has no running water, no electricity. And she has a book about Henry Ford. And she reads it by a kerosene lamp late at night. And she just dreams of one day becoming an engineer and working at Ford. Her parents actually raise enough money to send her to go to college in America. And so she gets on the boat and she's waving goodbye, doesn't know if she's actually even ever going to see them again. She graduates Oklahoma State University with a degree in engineering, and she gets an interview at Ford. When she shows up, the hiring manager looks very strange and basically says, "We don't have any female engineers. We don't hire them." And she starts to leave. And then she decides to turn around and tell this hiring manager her story, how she grew up, how she didn't have any of these amenities and read this book, and basically says to him, "You don't have any female engineers. How about making history and hiring the first one?" And he hires her. And that was Sunil Gupta's mom. That was his mom. So I love this story. And the part I love most about it is when Sunil went for his second round of trying to get funded for Rise, he told that story. And when one investor, someone asked them, why'd you decide to invest in this app? She said, "Oh, the story about his mom." So, I mean, it speaks to something, right? In the book too, Sunil talks about the fact, and I don't know if you guys know this story, it's been told before, but in the 1940s, instant cake mixes first showed up on store shelves, and they didn't sell at all. And everyone was like, why didn't they sell? So they hired this famous psychologist who is the guy who invented focus groups. And he realized that it was too easy. So they took out the egg that was in the recipe. And so one of the things you had to do when you made the instant cake mix is add in an egg, and then it sold like crazy. And so what he notes is a thing that Michael Norton, who's at Harvard, says, and I'll quote him, he says, quote, "We place nearly 5 times more value on a product we helped build than on a product we simply buy." And I think this is one of the enduring reasons that a place like Second City has done so well for over 60 years. And remember, we do original content. Like what other arts organization just does like new work and is really commercially successful? But what we've done is we've tested it out and co-created it with our audiences. And they've already told us what works and what doesn't. And everyone has their fingerprints on the show and they feel like they're completely invested. I had on Carter Phipps, who co-wrote a book with John Mackey from Whole Foods. And he says you need to think in terms of a win-win-win. So it's not just the win-win situation. The win-win would be you and me. But the third is who else is going to benefit from our collaboration becoming successful. So that creates even a bigger kind of co-creation when you think about how you want to persuade and talk and collaborate with your potential clients and friends and colleagues. Before I pass it over to Stephanie, I interviewed Frances Frey, and she co-wrote a book called Unleashed with Anne Morris. And this is maybe one of my favorite phrases about kind of what we're talking about. And they say in the book, quote, "We believe the future of work depends on our willingness to exchange the gift of each other's transformation." The gift of each other's transformation. What a valuable way to enter the conversation of co-creation. If we're really looking, in improv, we talk about this all the time, the need to be others focused. Before we go on stage, before any event, whether it's a workshop or a show, everyone goes around and pats each other on the back and says, "Got your back," or virtually puts it in the chat like I did. So that is a thing that we do. And I think it's an orientation that towards co-creation, which is not a natural orientation. We are not born to say yes and. Our default setting in behavioral economics teaches us this is to do nothing or say no. So you need to have these nudges, whatever works for you, to get you to be in that more collaborative space where you're willing to have other people's fingerprints on your ideas. Stephanie, I'll pass it over.
Kelly, I'm going to remember that for the next time my children say no automatically to one of my requests.
Oh, the parenting thing is a whole other thing.
You're just wired that way, I guess. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we are now going to move on to resilience. So give me a second to share my screen for a moment. Okay, here we go. Resilience. I think we all know that word from the past year. That is something that we have really, it may have been inside of us, but we have been called to action on resilience in 2020 and the beginning of 2021. We don't really have a choice. We need to respond. We need to change. We need to relook at how we're doing things. Whether you want to or not, if you want to continue to be successful within your organization. Something that I really wanted to focus on is, this year, it was really a chance for all of us. And if you haven't done it yet, you still have time, because we're going to be in this for a while longer. We don't necessarily know exactly what that means. So we need to evaluate, and we need to really think outside of the box. So one question that I would put to all of you is, how many of you have been running the same annual campaign year over year? How many of you, have really, in light of COVID, still continue to try and run a very similar annual campaign process? I would respond to that. There's really two types of organizations that I've been running into throughout the course of this year. Some organizations got very comfortable. They were, really running a similar campaign year over year. They had had the same gala for 7 years in a row. They were sending out the same or a very similar direct mail campaign at the end of the year. They just kind of were doing the same thing over and over again. So this was really, they were forced to examine their mission, look at their story, look at how they were communicating and how they were connecting with their donor base of support and their constituents. Some organizations were not even really strong in the basics that were going into the pandemic. They weren't connecting with their donor base of support. They weren't stewarding. They weren't saying thank you and showing that gratitude, as Kelly has really referred to a number of times today. So that brought on a whole lot of additional challenges because they were finding that their donor base of support was kind of just really loosely connected to them. So they needed to ensure that that they got creative and that they slowed down and they figured out how to create a plan to connect. So we're also working with organizations that have to do that right now. So no matter what is going on, either internally or externally, it comes back to that basic feeling that we need to feel value. We need to feel appreciated. It is just really an inherent human feeling that we need to have from others when we do something, when we rise to whatever that challenge is. So I would just say this year has really encouraged all of us to embrace that out of the box thinking. We've seen, as I referred to earlier, many very creative Zoom or online types of events. Right now, I'm planning a really fun event in May for one of my clients, where they are an organization called Teach, and they teach immigrants how to speak English in a variety of different languages. And so we have identified a chef that is going to come in and cook cuisine that is relevant to a specific area of the world, and allow people to interact in that way that's also kind of mission relevant. I have a client last week, you saw the North Lawndale Employment Network, a part of that story, and Second City was the MC. Rashad Nadine Scott is one of the Second City members, and she came in and she hosted the event and brought a lot of humor that was kind of woven in with a very important topic, and brought some light and humor to the viewing experience, and we got incredible feedback on that. So this is really a chance for you to think about ways that from an event perspective, and how can you engage with your donors in a way that, you know, may not necessarily be event related. Can you send a postcard that just has a very short message with a picture of, you know, how your people are doing well during COVID, how you're keeping them safe, how you're creatively running your programs, and say, hey, your dollars are allowing us to protect our, you know, our program recipients, and this is what you're allowing us to do. Figure out some really creative and thoughtful ways that just let people know that you're still thinking of them, and that no matter what's going on, they're still going to be important to your mission and keeping it moving forward. So one other thing that I just want to share about this is that, you know, we are finding that our clients are reaching and achieving their goals. They may not get there the same way that they did pre-pandemic, but if they're thoughtful about it, and if they put all of these best practices in place about cultivation and stewardship and really connecting with their donors, they are finding that their donors are still coming on board. So don't feel that, you know, we're in a pandemic, that donors are not going to show up. They are definitely showing up. They may not necessarily be coming in at the same levels, but some really are. And what we're also seeing is it's been giving organizations an opportunity to really broaden the amount of corporations, the amount of donors, maybe on smaller levels. You know, maybe we're seeing more gifts in the $100 range or the $250 range instead of the $1,000 or the $5,000 range, but lots of gifts, you know, over, you know, people spread out over the country that are able to attend your virtual event, making $100, $250 event gifts, excuse me, instead of, you know, 250 people attending your event is really an incredible opportunity. Kelly, oops, sorry, I need to go back. We're not actually at the question and answer section yet, but Kelly has a little bit to share on resilience, and then we are gonna hop into a Q&A. So Kelly, take away our last piece.
So I just wrote this down when you were talking. We were working in Second City with Yale Exec Ed, and before COVID, and then it shut down. And I saw this post that Heidi Wood Brooks at Yale posted about a thing that she started doing in her classes. And this is all about acknowledged suffering at work, which we're not good at. Culturally, we are not good at that, and we need to get better at it. Suffering is a part of the human condition. We are all humans. If we want to be peak performers, we need to sort of deal with all of our human stuff. So this is an exercise she does when first day of class with a new class. She gives everyone a slip of paper and a pen. It says, don't sign this sheet, but write down some pain that you're having right now. And it can be a stubbed toe. It could be worry about student loans. It could be a death in the family. And she collects all the slips of paper and she just starts reading them. And it really affects the room because they recognize that there is a lot of pain that different people are living with and dealing with. And just this acknowledgement reduces some of the burden. So the woman who was running Exec Ed at that time left to go run learning for a very big soft drink company in the United States of America. And right after we all got shut down, she reached out and was like, hey, does Second City have something in the area of resilience? I'm like, yeah, that's that core area. She goes, I need something delivered to our people online. They're dispersed. They're feeling scared. They're not connected. And so it was funny because we had done this shift where the training center all credit to Abby Wagner at Second City, had shifted and done those classes online and retained like 80% of our students, I think actually more. And then we started shifting the corporate work. And this was the first workshop that we did virtually. And it was funny because I told her that we were going to have a musical director, and she's like, why would you have a musical director? I'm like, you want to join the call, there should be a playlist playing, and then they can cover stuff. And it's actually, adding music is actually a terrific thing in these environments. So we did a couple different exercises virtually with this team. And one of the things is that to be resilient in these times, you need to be more of a divergent thinker. So divergent thinking, it's hard, right? Human beings tend to go to familiar patterns, and we stay in those. But innovators have to sort of think, the term out of the box get used a lot. It's divergent thinking. So one of the exercises we have to practice divergent thinking is we'll show a series of images on the screen, like a ball or a toothbrush. And the job of the person who sees the image is to shout out the name of that, not the name of that image, but any other name. So you have to call it what it isn't. This is not easy. Like, you recognize that it's very hard to do that because you're just so ingrained in, like, it's a red ball. I see a red ball, but you have to say shoe or something like that. But you do that over a period of time, and you start to work on that muscle, that divergent thinking muscle. Maria Serwa is a psychologist who talks about the fact that there's always a swamp in a pond. There's always a swamp in the pond. It is your choice, and you have the agency to decide if you want to be in the pond or you want to be in the swamp. You're going to end up in both at a certain point, but really recognize that you can try to put yourself in a pond mindset. When we were developing this workshop, my wife, Anne, who's worked at Second City longer than I have and was the artistic director of the training center for a decade, I said, do you have any exercises in this area? And so I think this is a terrific exercise, and I think it's something that you could do or practice with your people. And Anne calls it WISH, the WISH exercise. So you get a piece of paper and you have three areas. And in the first, you're going to write down a wish of something you could do that you wish you could do right now, that you can't. So mine was like swim in the salt water. I couldn't do that. In the second column, you write down the emotion or the feeling you think you'd get if you could experience the wish. So I wrote down refreshed. And then finally, in the third column, you just write down something that you could do now to experience that emotion. And so if it's refreshing, I'm like, oh, I could splash water on my face. I could exercise or go for a walk or listen to some music, the different things. And what you realize by getting that third column is you do have some agency over how you're entering this period we're in, this conversation we're having. But it's not easy, and you do need to practice. I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite phrases, and then we'll take your questions. And it's something I've used when I've had problems in my life, and it's an improv thing. You've got to play the scene you're in, not the scene you want to be in. Play the scene you're in, not the scene you want to be in. And if you do that, you're going to have a much better chance of succeeding, and you're going to have a better time doing it anyway.
That is just a great life lesson in general.
Yeah, yes.
All around, great life lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kelly. It's just been so much fun partnering with you.
Yeah.
On this project. I love doing this with you. Just a couple of things. Your friend, a fellow Nutrier class of 84 classmate reached out to you through
Trevian.
the Q&A, Kathleen McCann.
Hi.
Said hello to you. So just wanted to let you know that was out there.
Thank you. Hi.
Kelly and I would really, before we jump into the Q&A and before some of you might jump off, we really want to thank Chicago Innovation and also Wintrust for having the two of us today. We really enjoyed being here. We are happy to send out this presentation at the end, and it has our contact information on there as well, our email addresses. So certainly feel free to reach out to us that way. Also, you can feel free to link in with us or follow us on Facebook. So we're out there and available to answer questions that you might have. But right now, we would like to turn this over to all of you and see if you have any questions that either Kelly and I can answer. There is at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button, so you can type in there. We've had some questions that have already come in there that we've been answering along the way. And there's also a chat, so certainly you can put that in there as well.
Stephanie, I saw a couple people recommended Brene Brown, and of course her work is terrific. I actually had her on the Getting to Yes And podcast. It's the most listened to podcast we've had, but I think her work is really important in that it opens up all that shame stuff. And if you think about improvisation, when you go into a beginning improv class, we are having you unlearn all of that stuff. We are reducing or trying to eliminate the fear and the shame, because that is the stuff that gets in the way, even in the easy times. And then in the hard times, it becomes even more crucial.
Absolutely. Okay, so we do have a question, Kelly. So the question is, when you have so many different things that your organization is focused on, how do you know which story to highlight? That is such a good question. Kelly, do you want to answer that first?
I guess what I would sort of say is your story is never static. So don't think that just because Second City, we sell a lot of different things. And what we need to focus on is, what is the conversation I'm having right now? Who is the audience that's in front of me? What is important to them that we can sort of connect to? So I think, you're always going to be juggling many stories that you're drawing from. And this is an improv thing, right? It's how you're creating without a script, is you're just drawing on everything that you've learned and talked about and thought about, and recognizing what is the conversation I'm having right now. And I don't think we do that enough. I think we make a lot of assumptions about the conversation we might be having, and the other person might be doing that as well. So, and the only way you actually, and this is the scholars at the University of Chicago talk about this a lot, the only way you're going to get to that truth is by asking a lot of questions. It is good to ask questions. People like to talk about themselves. And you will find it pleasurable to hear about them in most cases. I know that's not always the case, but let's assume with all good intention. So ask the question, what's important to you? What's going on in your world right now? And I think that idea, and we talked about Heidi Brooks and the idea of the pain point. It's like, what's hurting you? What's the problem? And how can I help you, solve your problem? I don't know, Stephanie, I don't know if you have any builds on that.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really, really good point. I think that oftentimes we say to our clients, what's the thing that you need to really focus on right now? What's the message that you want to get out there? But I also think that on top of that, to build on that, is that there's many avenues for you to be able to tell stories as well. And so you could tell brief stories through your use of social media. Everybody has an iPhone or some sort of camera in this day and age. It's very easy to film. It's very easy to tell a story. So you can get multiple stories out there. But I would say that I agree with Kelly in the sense of, if you're doing an event, if you're doing something like a really professional production, finding that one point of, that pain point or that, thing that needs to be highlighted this year is the way to go, because people can wrap their minds more around that. When you have too much going on, it really can be very distracting. So spend time with your group, sit down, interview donors, find out what is appealing right now. What's that main point of essential discussion that needs to go on this year.
So I saw one of the questions was about how you get your story shortened, and I gave the one example of the 60-30-10 as a way to practice it, and that of course is one way to do it. I mean, we in our field, brevity is the soul of wit, I think is the Shakespearean quote. It's hard to pare down. It's hard to edit. It takes practice. And so saying your story out loud to a family member, to a colleague, try your stuff out. Sunil Gupta, who I talked about earlier, has this in his book a ton, which is he just didn't practice. And he thinks back to law school where they practiced all the time, in terms of getting in court. But if you have something so crucial, you've got to practice it. Steph, I don't know if you have anything additional.
Yeah, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
That's how
Yes.
you get it down. You know, the more you practice it and write it down. Write it down.
Write it
and
down. Yes.
practice it, you
Yep.
know, so that's how you can get it short and succinct.
Someone else asked a question about getting everyone on board. Give everyone voice. So everyone needs to be able to tell their story and know that it matters. So that it's like, you know, when you call meetings, make sure that the people who are there have a role to be there, and try to get rid of distractions. So Adam Alter is at the NYU Stern School of Business, and he has this fantastic book called Irresistible, which is all about the way technology gets in our way. And I know we're slaves to technology now, but there was a study that he draws on, which is that even an upside down cell phone, so a cell phone who's, you know, it's the back facing up on a table between two people, limits people's ability to communicate with each other. It distracts them. So, you know, putting our phones away, our computers away, or asking on the Zoom call, make it a smaller group that really is, hey, it's going to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's it. I just need your undivided attention. And that also means everyone has to be invited to speak and to share. So I just think it's like pulling on all the sort of threads of collaboration, and being hyper aware that we don't do it well. So that we really need to like have our list of things. Have we done our check-in? Has everyone spoken? Have we double checked in? Those kinds of things I think are important.
Absolutely. And I think that in addition to that, we often, you know, bring everybody together during a board meeting to do this exercise. We do an exercise called Knowing Your Organization, where we collaboratively as a group help to identify, you know, I talked about the one words exercise, you know, at the beginning, where we just brainstorm together one words that talk about the organization. We ask everybody there to talk about, can you actually explain the organization in one sentence? That's really, really hard, right? So we share those, we write them up on the board together, and we talk about the value add and the impact that the organization has. But with all of that information that we put together, people can then begin to formulate their own stories. And people get excited about that. It's fun to see everybody on the same page. It's fun to really get excited about the mission of the organization together. It's a really bonding type of activity. And I've even done it successfully over Zoom. Of course, it's much better when you're in person and you can really feel the energy in the room. But even on Zoom, I've had very successful sessions with people. So I would just say, like, anybody that is going to be an ambassador, bring them together into a Zoom call and just have this be the point of your conversation while you're together.
I'll just add to that, you know, reminding yourself that the reason people get up in the morning and do these things is often not for a paycheck. It's because of meaning and purpose. And the fact is, meaning is made in moments. Meaning isn't made just in mission statements. Mission statements are great. They're inspiring and aspirational, but it happens in the moments. That's the thank you that we were talking about. That's the noticing that we're talking about. So you can really go a long way by just having a true human moment with someone. And that also allows you to make the inevitable mistakes and recover from them. Because people love second acts, especially in America. They will forgive you your mistakes if you have shown yourself to be a person who, you know, cares.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. Such a great point. Excellent. Well, I don't really see that we have any other questions.
I think we're done.
True. I know. We did it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the great feedback. We're so happy to be here. And once again, thank you to Wintrust. Thank you to Chicago Innovation. Kelly, once again, thank you to you.
Thanks,
this
Stephanie.
was really fun to partner together. And please reach out to us if you have any other questions. Thanks, everyone.